Hello again, and welcome to day 3 of our Innovation at Work virtual week. I'm Tom Standage, Deputy Editor of The Economist. Our theme today is how we work. One silver lining of the pandemic is that it's forced a radical shift in working habits, in many cases for the better, providing a rare opportunity to rewire the world of work. But this opportunity also brings many challenges. How do you manage and mentor remote workers? How do you build trust without resorting to micromanagement or surveillance? How can companies ensure that these changes have a positive impact on diversity and inclusion? What does all this mean for training and reskilling? And do we in fact need to rethink the way that companies are structured? So there's lots to dig into, and we're excited to bring you a series of case studies, interviews, and panel discussions on this theme. We'll be hearing from some of the world's most respected and innovative companies, including Ben & Jerry's, Crocs, Coots, Fujitsu, and Nestle. Before we get to that, I'd like to thank all the sponsors who've supported our Innovation at Work virtual week, including Anaplan, Citrix, Google Cloud, and Microsoft. We'll be starting the day with a presentation from Poppy Gustafsson, CEO of Darktrace, who will tell us about dealing with the security risks associated with remote working without sacrificing creativity or innovation. Then we'll hear from Clive Tillotson of Fujitsu about how to deal with presenteeism, the pressure that many people feel to be always on and always available, at least until the boss logs off. And then there's a live Q&A with Clive where you can submit your own questions. What about the water cooler, that mythical fountain of innovation where bumping into a colleague can lead to brilliant new ideas, or so they say? We'll be hearing from a range of companies in a panel discussion about how to keep creativity and innovation alive and recreate those water cooler moments even while working virtually. And we'll also hear from executives from Nestle, Ben & Jerry's, and Crocs on the accelerating adoption of e-commerce, the rise of corporate activism, and how the pandemic has brought the question of corporate purpose into sharp focus. So we're very excited by this lineup, and we hope that you'll enjoy it. So let's kick things off with our opening keynote from Poppy Gustafsson, the CEO of Darktrace.
Hello, and thank you very much. My name is Poppy, and I'm the CEO of Darktrace, a cyber AI company. So I want to talk to you today briefly, not just about the huge shift in our working practices over the last year, but also about the way that it's changed the way we think about security and the resilience of our businesses. So 2020 was the year where the adoption of many new technologies, particularly things such as cloud platforms, went through the roof. From Teams to Google Hangouts, a lot of these are becoming a regular part of our daily activities, and many of you might be like me, where you're not just using one of them, but lots of them. And we are now using the cloud much more than we used to stay connected with each other and to share data. And this has been a huge enabler, especially as we shift to working from home. But it's meant that our already complicated digital businesses have become even more distributed. We can't wrap our arms around our businesses in the way that we used to. There are little pockets of data all over. I think about this like sort of lily pads in a pond. The challenge for IT teams in the pandemic was colossal. What was so unique was the speed in which they were required to adopt a lot of this new technology. We didn't get 6 months' notice that the pandemic was about to arrive and to hit us. Businesses had to adapt quickly and roll out the tools for employees within their homes. We didn't have any choice but to embrace flexibility that home working requires. Many of us are sharing Wi-Fi connection with our homeschooling children or our housemates, or we're allowing workarounds like using non-corporate devices. And whilst this has enabled a lot of the transition, it's been a perfect storm for security. What about change management controls? What about security protocols? What about training? A lot of these measures were there for good reason, but the security rulebook was thrown out of the window. And the reality is that the necessity of many of these platforms, their convenience, trumped the concerns for security. Let's take the case of Zoom. Remember the times of Zoom bombing that was hitting the press? And yet it is still one of the most widely used platforms. And again, this is an example of convenience trumping security. Darktrace, we have a unique perspective on this shift. We have artificial intelligence plugged into the corporate digital system. So we've been at the heart of this change, and we've seen with our 4,000 organizations the way they adapt. But we've also seen the attackers adapt. And one of the biggest increase in attacks has been against the very technologies that we've come to love and trust, cloud-based tools and systems like Teams and Zoom. And this is because they're very rich in data, but they can be purely secured because often security teams lack visibility into these systems. From March to the end of 2020, we saw that the attacks against them increased by fourfold. So let me walk you through a couple of examples from our experience. So if we think about things such as software as a service, it's not just that these platforms are compromised, it's just that they sometimes are a blind spot where attackers can move unseen within an organization. Generally, the way that we see that is that attackers will coax the employee into clicking a link, leading them to download some malware that would harvest their credentials. They could then use credentials to access these systems where they will start to have a little bit of a poke around to see which data they can get their hands on. So one example of this was from a member of a finance team was targeted, and the attacker, they were logged in from Bulgaria, and they moved around within the Microsoft 365 environment onto SharePoint to gain access to payroll data. And obviously, payroll data contains some highly privileged information. And the reality is internal security teams often forget about these little pockets of their businesses on systems such as these, and it can be a blind spot where attackers can hide. A second big trend that we've seen is the sophistication of the email attacks. We have up on screen here an example. Obviously, all the names in this have been changed for their privacy and security reasons. But let me remind you that 94% of the attacks find their way at first into an organization through email. And these emails are getting increasingly sophisticated. We're seeing them exploit the pandemic. So they will be playing on people's fears. They'll be pretending that they're from the World Health Organization. They could be from impersonating a government organization, talking to you about business loans that might be available to you. And they're taking advantage of the fact that this is something that's on people's minds, and they're more likely to click these links. And they can be better researched than ever. They're very highly personalized, using names, relevant content, something that might be going on within your organization. And so it's no longer realistic to expect humans to be able to catch these very advanced email attacks. And like digital fakes, they themselves are too good. We saw in one company, the CFO himself was the victim. So he was socially engineered into allowing an attacker into his email account. And as a consequence, the attacker was able to send emails to members of his team. And this really plays on that relationship of boss to team member. You're much more likely to respond quickly and without challenge to your boss. There's no malware in the email. There's no link. It all seems very relevant. They're referencing a previous historical email chain. But what's happening here is they're trying to solicit information from his team, possibly to inform a secondary attack. And this is about taking phishing onto that next level. Lastly, another example, and one of the biggest examples of subtle and stealthy attacks, is the breach that hit the headlines, rightly so, on SolarWinds. So this is an example of a supply chain compromise where you have a trusted IT supplier, in this case SolarWinds, that had its software update poisoned. And this was distributed to thousands of its customers, including some of the organizations that we would have expected to be tightly secured. This was a huge wake-up call for the industry. This was a legitimate channel. Organizations that would expect to be watertight were getting compromised. And attacks such as these mean that the conversation's moved on. We have to start getting into the mindset of expecting more of these attacks. The reality is they will get into your systems, whether it's through the front door or through the back door. And the question should be, would you know if they are there? And that is the question that company boards are now asking all of their executive teams. So where have we been getting it wrong? So we've talked about the fact that the perimeter to our businesses is gone. The data is disparate, it's spread far and wide across different technologies and platforms and systems. We can't build a wall around it like we did it in the past to try and protect it from those attackers. And the first generation security tools are no longer sufficient. We're in a new era of attacks, and these are outpacing a human's ability to respond. A lot of them are rule-based tools, so they're looking for historical attacks, and it simply will not work, especially against things such as the SolarWinds type of breaches. We cannot always predict this stuff. We're seeing an explosion in IoT. You've got organizations that have got internet connected coffee machines in their businesses. How is it that you're going to be able to think all of the ways and imagine all the ways that a company could get breached? Security professionals expect the attacks to get yet more intelligent still. Think about that example of the spear phishing email I showed you earlier. Now imagine that could be entirely generated by artificial intelligence. The technology exists. It's possible to automatically trawl through social media or LinkedIn connections to find out a trusted connection that they could impersonate, one that you're more likely to trust. And as a CEO, it's a really worrying prospect because not only are the first gen tools not working, but it's no longer a human scale problem. These emails can be created at machine speed, but more than that, the attacks will move through your business at machine speed. The damage done in these cyber attacks is not measured in years and months, but within seconds and fractions of a second. And you can't bring humans to a machine speed of attack. This is a new era of cyber, and these attacks are intelligent and they are fast, and they are outpacing the human's ability to respond. So I know that a lot of this sounds quite terrifying, but this is a challenge that can be met with technology. So how do we protect our data and our businesses, but without taking away from these new styles of work, whilst retaining some of our flexibility? 2020 was a catalyst for change, not just in how we work, but how we build up resilience. We need to recognize that our workforce is vulnerable, and we need to shift from, instead of defining security about like what's safe or who do I trust, but asking instead, what's going on within my organization? Are there any problems? If an attacker was inside my business, would I know about it? And the good news is that AI is really good at this. By definition, it deals with the unpredictable data and draws insights and conclusions faster than a human ever could. And it's entirely self-learning. We kind of think of this like an immune system. So it's a bit like, if you think about your own bodies, it's a bit like having skin. You've got skin there and it protects you. It keeps out the vast majority of viruses and bacteria. But when something gets inside the body, that's when you need your immune system. And we're now in this new era of attacks. So we need an immune system for our businesses and organizations that can recognize what's normal for that group of people and systems and understands when something strange is going on. So what the AI is doing is building up a sense of self for the organization and pulling together the clues from anywhere in your business to pull together the bigger picture of whether an attacker is on the inside. It's not about email security or cloud security or SaaS security, but securing your business wherever it happens to be. And what's interesting is that when you have that sense of self, not only does the artificial intelligence understand where the threatening activity is happening, but it also knows how to stop that attack in a way that is very targeted. Gone are the days that you can I'm thinking about these films from the 80s when there was, a technology challenge and they'd pull the plug out from the wall and power down the entire system. Those days are gone. You need to be able to balance security with the ability to keep the business running day to day. And AI has been a critical ally in this transition to remote working, but the changes don't stop there. Security needs AI to evolve. With a digital immune system, businesses are afforded the opportunity to adopt so many of these new and exciting technologies out there, from the cloud communication tools to your internet-connected coffee machines, but in the knowledge that the convenience is not coming at the cost of resilience of your business. Knowing that when you sit at your kitchen table at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, ready to start your working from home day, that your business is going to be there on the other side of your laptop. Done right, AI and cybersecurity are a huge enabler for businesses. We are in this era of uncertainty, and your digital immune system can evolve with you and your business as it responds. We don't know what the threats of tomorrow will look like, just as we don't know what the new technology innovation of tomorrow will be. But what we do know is that with intelligent security, you'll be able to adapt and take advantage of the opportunity whilst protecting the resilience of your business. Having a finger on the pulse of your organization has never been more important as we work from kitchen tables, our studies, and our bedrooms. And the beauty of AI is it stops the bad activity in its tracks whilst allowing our employees to innovate and bring in all of the advantages of modern technology, however weird and wonderful and creative that those innovations and technologies might be. And it never stops adapting. Whatever the next challenges or opportunities that your business faces, artificial intelligence can learn with you. And for the first time, your business can fight back against the threat at the speed of a machine, leaving the people to do what we do best, whether that's a video conference with colleagues, a chat with our friends, or drinking that well-deserved coffee. Thank you very much.